It was a bright Saturday morning in Accra when Mama Efua decided to visit her son, Kwame, and his new wife Zola. She hadn't seen them for a few weeks, and she missed them. With a warm smile, she packed a basket full of groceries, fresh vegetables, ripe plantains, and a bottle of homemade palm oil. She wanted to surprise them and cook lunch, the way mothers do. The house stood proudly at the end of the quiet street, painted cream and gold, surrounded by hibiscus plants she had planted herself months earlier. It was a beautiful home, one she and her late husband had built years ago, now quietly placed under a family trust so Kwame and Zola could start their life in comfort. When Mama Efua knocked, she expected laughter and hugs. Instead, when the door opened, Zola froze. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, you didn't tell me you were coming." For a moment, the air felt heavy. Mama Efua's heart dipped, but she quickly recovered, still smiling. "I just came to see how you're both doing, my dear." Zola hesitated, then stepped aside without saying another word. Inside, the living room looked the same, yet something felt different. The warmth that once filled the house seemed replaced by cold silence. Efua placed the groceries on the counter and glanced around, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling creeping up her chest. Something was off, and deep down, she knew this visit wouldn't be like the others. Dinner that evening was supposed to be warm and full of laughter, but instead, it felt like walking on eggshells. Mama Efua sat at the table, helping herself to a little rice and stew she had cooked earlier. The smell of onions and spices filled the room, but Zola's face stayed stiff. "Mama, maybe next time, call before showing up," Zola said, her tone sweet but sharp. "We have our own rhythm now." The words stung, though she tried not to show it. Efua smiled faintly and nodded. "Of course, my dear. I just wanted to bring you both something nice." Across the table, Kwame forced a smile, his eyes darting between his wife and his mother. He looked tired, as if he had been caught in this awkward space for a while. He tried to lighten the mood with small talk, but Zola rolled her eyes and focused on her plate. After dinner, while clearing the dishes, Efua overheard quiet voices from the living room. She hadn't meant to listen, but her name caught her attention. "Your mother treats this place like it's hers," Zola whispered harshly. "She needs to learn boundaries." Efua froze. She stood behind the kitchen counter, her hands trembling slightly as she set down her cup. Her late husband's face flashed in her mind. How proud he had been building this house brick by brick, saving every Sadie to make it their dream home. And now, the woman who slept under its roof was calling her an intruder. She took a slow breath, blinking back tears. She didn't want to cause a scene. She had always taught her children that silence could be stronger than shouting. So she quietly gathered her things, wiping the counter as if nothing had happened. Kwame came in a few minutes later, avoiding her eyes. "Ma, you'll stay the night, right?" he asked softly. "No, my son," she said gently. "I'll go home. It's getting late." He nodded, guilt flickering across his face, but he didn't argue. As Efua stepped outside, the night breeze brushed against her face. The sky over Accra was clear, and the distant sounds of laughter and music floated from nearby houses. Families were together, sharing joy. Yet she felt completely alone. She looked back once more at the house, the home she had poured her heart into, and her chest tightened. Zola's voice still echoed in her mind, each word cutting deeper. Still, she chose peace. For now. But deep inside, something had shifted. A quiet storm was forming in her heart, a mix of sadness, disappointment, and strength. She didn't know it yet, but this would be the last time she ever walked out of that house feeling unwelcome. 2 days later, the tension in the house had only grown heavier. Mama Efua had decided to stay a little longer, hoping to help around and maybe ease whatever strain was between Kwame and Zola. But instead of peace, she found constant bickering. Zola complained about everything, bills, chores, even how Kwame folded the laundry. "You never do anything right," she snapped one afternoon, slamming a cupboard. Kwame rubbed his temples, silent and weary. Efua, sitting nearby, tried to keep her voice gentle. "My daughter, sometimes small things don't deserve big anger. Talk kindly. It helps peace stay in the home." Zola turned sharply. "Mama, please. This is between me and my husband." Efua nodded, still calm. "I understand, but..." Before she could finish, Zola's voice rose. "No, you don't understand. You act like you live here, like this is your house. Stay out of it." The room went quiet. Even the ceiling fan seemed to pause. Efua's eyes softened, but her voice trembled slightly. "You're right, my dear. I don't live here. I just helped make sure you had a roof over your head." Zola's glare hardened. "Please leave, Mama. I need my space." Kwame stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, eyes full of conflict. For a moment, Efua waited for him to speak, to say something, anything, but he stayed silent. That silence cut deeper than Zola's words. She took a slow breath, forcing a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. "All right then," she said quietly. "I'll not trouble you." She walked to her room, folded her wrapper, and placed her things neatly into her small bag. Her fingers lingered on the handle, trembling just a bit. When she stepped out, Kwame was still standing by the doorway, staring at the floor. "Take care of yourself, my son," she said softly. He nodded without looking up. "Yes, Ma." Outside, the night air was cool and quiet. The street lights flickered, and the sound of distant music floated through the neighborhood. Efua walked slowly, her slippers brushing against the dusty road. Each step felt heavier than the last. She didn't cry, though her heart ached. She just whispered under her breath, "It's all right. Some lessons life teaches in silence." Behind her, the house stood still and proud, the same one her husband had built with love and sweat. Now it no longer felt like home. As she turned the corner, her eyes glistened under the streetlight. The pain was deep, but beneath it, something steadier began to rise, dignity. She knew that one day, truth had a way of returning home, even when people forgot where it started. A week later, Mama Efua decided to stop by the house for a quick moment. A few letters had been delivered to her place with Kwame's address still listed under her name. She thought it would be simple: drop off the mail, greet them politely, and leave. She didn't even plan to step inside. The afternoon sun was hot, and the neighborhood was quiet. As she reached the gate, she smiled, calling softly, "Zola, my dear, I just came to bring your mail." Zola appeared at the doorway, arms crossed. The look on her face made Efua's heart sink. "You again?" Zola snapped. "I told you not to come here uninvited." Efua blinked, confused. "I'm not here to stay, my daughter. The postman made a mistake, that's all. I thought you'd need these." She lifted the small bundle of envelopes in her hand, but Zola's voice only got louder. "I said don't come here. You don't live here anymore. Stop acting like you do." Her shouting carried down the street. A few neighbors peeked out from their windows, whispering to each other. Someone standing by the roadside even pulled out a phone, recording. Efua tried to stay calm, her voice low and steady. "Please, Zola, there's no need for this. I mean no harm." Then, suddenly, a flash of blue lights cut across the street. A police car rolled up, siren briefly wailing before it went silent. Two officers stepped out. "Good afternoon," one said. "We received a call about a trespassing situation." Zola's tone changed, firm, almost proud. "Yes, officer, that's her. She keeps coming here, even after I told her not to. She won't leave us alone." Efua stood still, her heart pounding. She looked around, realizing this scene was happening in front of the very home she and her late husband had built with their hand. The hibiscus flowers she had planted by the gate were blooming, bright and beautiful, completely unaware of the chaos unfolding beside them. One of the officers approached gently. "Ma'am, can we see your ID, please?" Efua hesitated, her hands trembling as she reached for her small purse. "Of course, officer," she said quietly. "But this must be a mistake." Zola folded her arms, watching with a faint smirk. "No mistake. I told her to stay away." The neighbors were now whispering louder. Some shook their heads, others stared in disbelief. Efua felt her throat tighten. She wanted to speak, to explain that this house was hers. But the words caught in her chest. The officer waited patiently as she handed over her ID. The world around her seemed to move in slow motion. The flashing lights, the murmurs, the humiliation. In that moment, Efua realized something had broken beyond repair. What once was family had turned into something cold, sharp, and public. And for the first time, she understood. Zola hadn't just crossed a line, she had erased it completely. At the police station, the room was quiet except for the hum of an old ceiling fan. Mama Efua sat calmly in a wooden chair, her small handbag resting on her. She looked tired but composed, her dignity still intact despite the humiliation she had just faced. One of the officers sat across from her, flipping through his notepad. "Madam," he said gently, "the young woman claims you were trespassing on her property. Do you have any proof of ownership or permission to be there?" Efua gave a small, sad smile. "Yes, officer. I do." She reached into her handbag and pulled out a carefully folded document, the original deed to the house. She had carried it for years, more out of sentiment than necessity. It was the only home her late husband ever built. The officer unfolded it carefully, scanning the papers. His eyes widened slightly. He turned to his colleague. "This house is registered under Madame Efua's name." The younger officer looked surprised. "Are you sure?" Efua nodded quietly. "Yes, officer. I let my son and his wife live there after their wedding. I wanted them to start well. I never thought I'd need to prove it was mine." Just then, the door swung open. Zola marched in, her voice loud and angry. "Where is she? She keeps showing up, and now she's wasting our time at the station." The first officer didn't say a word. He simply slid the deed across the table toward her. "Madam," he said calmly, "it appears this house legally belongs to your mother-in-law." Zola froze. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. The color drained from her face as her eyes darted from the paper to Efua. Efua stood slowly, her back straight, her voice soft but steady. "You called the police on the woman who gave you that home," she said. There was no anger in her tone, only deep hurt. The room went silent. Even the officers looked uncomfortable. Zola swallowed hard, her eyes filling with shame, but she couldn't meet Efua's gaze. Efua took the deed from the table and folded it back into her purse. "I didn't come to cause trouble," she said quietly. "I only came to return mail. But I see now, sometimes kindness is mistaken for weakness." The officer gave a small nod of respect. "We're sorry, madam. You're free to go." As Efua stepped outside, the evening breeze brushed her face. The sky was turning gold as the sun began to set over Accra. She took a deep breath and looked up, her eyes glistening, not from defeat, but from clarity. That day, the truth unfolded in front of everyone. She didn't need to shout or argue. The paper spoke for her, and for the first time in a long while, she walked away knowing that silence could sometimes be the loudest form of power. By the next morning, everyone in the family had heard what happened. The story spread fast. How Zola had called the police on Mama Efua, only for everyone to find out that the house actually belonged to her. Aunties were whispering, cousins were texting, and neighbors were shaking their heads. Some said it was shocking. Others said it was shameful. But one thing was clear. Zola had crossed a line that could never be erased. A few days later, there was a knock on Efua's door. When she opened it, she saw Kwame standing there, eyes down, looking smaller than she'd ever seen him. He held a small bag in one hand, like he had been staying somewhere else. "Ma," he said quietly, "I didn't know she called the police. I swear I didn't." Efua looked at her son, her heart heavy but calm. She could see the guilt in his face, the way his shoulders slumped, the way his voice trembled. For a moment, she said nothing. She just studied him, remembering the little boy who used to follow her everywhere, always eager to help. "Kwame," she finally said, her tone gentle but firm. "You married her, yes. But you forgot where your foundation came from." He blinked, swallowing hard. "I know, Ma. I was wrong." Efua sighed, stepping aside so he could come in. She poured him a cup of tea and sat across from him. The silence between them said more than words could. She wasn't angry anymore. She was just tired. "Sometimes," she said softly, "when you give people everything, they start to think it was theirs all along. They forget who sacrificed for them." Kwame nodded slowly, staring into his cup. "I should have defended you. I should have stopped her." Efua gave a small, sad smile. "It's not too late to learn, my son, but some lessons are painful." That night, after he left, Efua's phone buzzed with messages. Zola had been texting and calling nonstop. Each message was full of apologies, crying emojis, and long explanations. "Mama, please forgive me. I wasn't thinking. I was angry. I didn't mean for it to go that far. Please, can we talk?" Efua read them quietly, then put her phone face down on the table. She didn't reply. Not out of pride, but out of peace. She had no more words left to give. For the first time in years, she slept deeply that night. The air in her small home felt lighter, as if the weight of other people's disrespect had finally lifted. Meanwhile, across town, Kwame sat awake beside Zola, staring into the dark. He finally saw what he had taken for granted: his mother's kindness, her silence, her sacrifices. And for the first time, he truly felt the ache of realizing that love, once disrespected, never comes back the same way again. A few days passed, and Mama Efua sat in her small living room, staring at the old family photo on the wall. In the picture, her late husband stood proudly beside her, smiling, his arm around her shoulders. That house, the one she and her husband built, had always been a symbol of love and legacy. But now it was a reminder of pain and disrespect. She didn't want revenge. That wasn't who she was. But she knew she had to take back control, not just of the house, but of her peace. The next morning, she dressed neatly in her usual wrapper and headscarf and took a taxi to her lawyer's office in OSU. The lawyer, a calm middle-aged man who had handled her family matters for years, greeted her kindly. "Mama Efua, what brings you in today?" She smiled faintly. "It's time to put things in order," she said. "I want my house fully in my name. Remove Kwame as a beneficiary." He looked at her curiously. "Are you sure about this, Mama?" She nodded. "Yes. I gave them a gift, but they didn't value it. It's time they learn that kindness is not weakness." The lawyer adjusted his glasses and started preparing the papers. Within an hour, everything was signed and sealed. The ownership was now fully hers. No trusts, no shared names. Just Mama Efua. When she got home, she sat at her dining table and began writing a short, polite letter. Her handwriting was steady and clear. "Kwame and Zola, you have 30 days to vacate the property. Respectfully, Mama Efua." She folded it neatly and placed it in an envelope. The next morning, she sent it through a courier to their address, the same house that used to be hers. At first, Kwame thought it was a misunderstanding. He called immediately. "Ma, this letter, what does it mean? You're not serious, right?" Efua's voice stayed calm. "I'm very serious, my son. I've made my decision." He tried to argue, but she ended the call gently. When Zola read the letter, she broke down. Panic set in. She called, texted, even showed up at Efua's gate crying, her voice cracking. "Mama, please don't do this. We have nowhere to go. Please." But Efua stayed silent. She didn't shout, she didn't gloat. She simply turned and went inside, closing the gate behind her. Days went by, and her phone kept buzzing with messages, apologies, please, promises to change. Still, she didn't reply. For years, she had been patient, forgiving, and kind. But this time, her silence spoke louder than any words could. Inside her heart, she felt no joy, no bitterness, only clarity. Sometimes love needed distance to be understood. And sometimes, the only way to teach respect was to let people feel what life was like without your generosity. 30 days passed faster than anyone expected. On the morning of the deadline, the neighborhood was quiet when a moving truck pulled up in front of the house. The rumble of the engine broke the silence. Zola stood by the doorway, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Boxes were piled beside her, filled with clothes, dishes, and pieces of the life she thought would last forever. Kwame was pacing near the gate, looking helpless and lost. He had begged his mother to change her mind, but her silence had told him everything. This time, there would be no forgiveness. As the movers began loading their belongings into the truck, Zola suddenly dropped a bag and ran toward Mama Efua, who stood calmly on the pavement watching. Her wrapper was neatly tied, her posture straight. She looked like a queen who had seen too much to be shaken anymore. "Mama, please," Zola cried, her voice cracking. "Where will we go? We have nowhere else." Efua's expression didn't change. Her eyes were steady, not angry, just firm. "You should have thought about that before calling strangers on family," she said quietly. Her tone was soft, but her words cut deep. Zola covered her face, sobbing harder. Kwame stepped forward, his voice trembling. "Ma, please. I know I failed you. I let things get out of hand." Efua turned to him slowly. Her gaze softened for a moment. This was still her son, but her voice carried the weight of truth. "Kwame," she said, "I gave you everything. I wanted you to build on the love your father and I created. But love without respect dies fast. And now it's gone." He looked down, ashamed. For the first time, he understood that this wasn't punishment, it was consequence. The movers finished packing. Zola wiped her tears, clutching a small box to her chest. She looked around the house one last time, as if realizing too late what she had destroyed. When the truck drove off, the street fell silent again. Mama Efua stood at the gate, watching until they were out of sight. She didn't feel triumph. She felt peace, heavy, quiet peace. That evening, she walked through the empty house. The walls echoed with memories, Kwame's laughter as a child, her husband's voice calling her name, the sound of love that once filled every corner. The house smelled faintly of old wood and palm oil, familiar and comforting. On the wall hung her husband's portrait, slightly faded but full of life. Efua paused in front of it, tears welling softly in her eyes. She lit a candle beneath it and whispered, almost to herself, "Justice, not revenge." The flame flickered gently, casting a warm glow across the room. For the first time in a long while, the house felt alive again, not because of noise or people, but because peace had finally returned home. Weeks went by after the eviction. The neighborhood had already moved on, but the silence in Mama Efua's house was different now. It was peaceful. She spent her mornings watering her hibiscus plants and her evenings sitting on the porch with a cup of tea, listening to the faint sounds of children playing down the street. Life felt calm again. One quiet afternoon, she heard a gentle knock at her gate. When she opened it, there stood Kwame. His clothes were plain, his eyes tired, and his pride gone. He looked nothing like the confident young man who once thought he had everything figured out. "Ma," he said softly, his voice shaky, "we're sorry. Zola's been crying every day." Efua looked at him for a long moment, her face unreadable. Then she sighed, not out of anger, but from the weight of everything that had happened. "Sometimes," she said slowly, "tears are the price of arrogance." Kwame lowered his head, his hands fidgeting. "I know, Ma. We were wrong. She was wrong, and so was I. I should have stood up for you. I let things get too far." Efua didn't interrupt. She let him speak. His voice cracked as he continued. "We've been staying with a friend, but it's not easy. Zola keeps saying she wishes she could take everything back." Efua finally walked over to the wooden bench by the porch and gestured for him to sit beside her. "Kwame," she began gently, "your father built this house with his hands, brick by brick under the sun. I watched him sweat, save, and plan. He wanted it to be something lasting for the family. That's why it hurts so much to see it disrespected." Kwame nodded, tears forming in his eyes. "I understand now, Ma. I really do." She studied him for a moment. The boy she once raised was gone. Sitting in front of her was a man finally facing the consequences of his choices. "Listen to me," she said quietly. "Find your own home, Kwame. Build it with your hands. Maybe then she'll understand what it takes to have one. Maybe then you both will." He looked up at her, eyes glistening. We'll try, Ma. I promise. For a moment, neither spoke. The late afternoon sun cast a soft golden light on them, and a gentle breeze carried the smell of blooming flowers from her garden. Efua reached out and placed her hand on his shoulder. I don't hate her, she said. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. You both have to grow from this. Kwame nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. Thank you, Ma. As he walked away, Efua watched him go with a quiet heart. She knew he had finally learned the lesson life had been trying to teach him. Respect is worth more than comfort, and gratitude is the foundation of every home. Months later, life looked very different for Kwame and Zola. They now lived in a small rented apartment at the edge of the city. The walls were thin, the kitchen was tiny, and the roof leaked whenever it rained. It was nothing like the big house they once called home. But strangely, the silence between them had softened. They talked more, cooked together, and even laughed again, just a little. Zola often sat by the window, staring at the sky, replaying everything that happened. She thought about the day she called the police, about the look on Mama Efua's face when the truth came out. Each memory hurt a little more than the last. She had learned the hard way that pride could destroy everything love tried to build. One evening, there was a knock on the door. When Kwame opened it, he found an envelope on the floor with his mother's handwriting. He recognized it immediately. He opened it carefully and read aloud. Pride burns bridges. Humility rebuilds them. You're always welcome, but only with respect. Zola covered her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. Kwame smiled faintly. The message was short, but it said everything. Mama Efua wasn't cruel. She was teaching them something that no amount of comfort or money could ever teach. Respect, humility, and gratitude. Meanwhile, across town, Mama Efua sat in her garden, surrounded by her blooming hibiscus plants. The evening sun painted her face in gold as she sipped her tea slowly. Her neighbor, an old friend, leaned over the fence and asked, Do you ever regret what you did, Efua? Efua smiled softly, her eyes calm and wise. Regret? No, she said. Sometimes silence and distance are the only teachers people listen to. The camera lingers on her gentle smile, quiet, strong, and unbothered. Proof that real strength doesn't need to shout.